Every single night, millions of Americans over 60 are unknowingly doing something in the hour before bed that dramatically raises their stroke risk. Not once in a while, every single night. And the terrifying part is that most doctors never mention it. Most people have no idea it even exists. You've been told that strokes happen randomly, that they're bad luck, that if it runs in the family, there's not much you can do. That is not the full truth. Because what I'm going to show you today is that a specific cluster of small, seemingly harmless nighttime habits are quietly setting the stage for the most devastating event a human brain can experience. Stay with me until the end, because the number one habit on this list is something almost every single adult over 60 does without thinking. One large study found that this particular habit increases the likelihood of a nighttime or early morning stroke by up to 66%. And yet it's so normal, so embedded in your routine, that you've probably never once questioned it. I'm Dr. Christopher Hayes, a physician specialized in senior health with over 15 years of dedicated clinical experience. I've sat with patients who survived strokes. I've held the hands of families who didn't get that chance. What I'm about to share goes against everything you've been told about stroke prevention. The conventional message is eat less salt, take your medication, and hope for the best. But I've watched patients do everything right on paper and still end up in the emergency room because nobody warned them about what happens in the hour before they close their eyes. I refuse to stay silent any longer. Let's start with what's actually happening inside your body while you sleep. Here's what most people don't realize. The hours between 10 at night and 6 in the morning are the most vulnerable window for stroke in adults over 60. Research published in the journal Stroke found that nearly 45% of all ischemic strokes, the kind caused by blockages, occur between midnight and 8 in the morning. This is not coincidence. It's biology. During sleep, your blood pressure naturally dips. Blood flows more slowly. If your blood is even slightly too thick, if your arteries are even slightly narrowed, if your heart rhythm shifts even briefly into an irregular pattern during the night, a clot can form. And that clot doesn't need to be large. It doesn't need to be dramatic. A clot the size of a grain of rice lodged in the wrong artery can permanently take away your ability to speak, to walk, or to remember the faces of people you love. Now here's what terrifies me most. The habits that increase this risk don't feel dangerous. They feel normal. They feel like routine. That's what makes them so deadly. So today I'm going to walk you through 7 bedtime habits ranked from concerning to critically dangerous. Some of them will surprise you. One of them is going to stop you in your tracks. And by the end of this video, you'll have a simple, practical plan to protect your brain every single night. But first, I want to ask you something. Are you currently taking any medication for blood pressure or cholesterol? If you are, type meds in the comments below. If you manage your health primarily through lifestyle and diet, type natural. I want to understand who's watching, because your answers genuinely shape the conversations we have here. And if this kind of information feels important to you, if you believe every adult over 60 deserves to know the real risks hiding in plain sight, please hit that like button right now. It tells me to keep making this content and it helps more people find it. Let's begin. Habit number 7, eating a heavy, high-sodium meal within 2 hours of bedtime. This one surprises people because the connection isn't immediate. You eat a large dinner at 8 or 9 o'clock at night, you feel satisfied, maybe a little full, you watch some television, you go to sleep. Nothing seems wrong, but here's what's happening inside your body while you drift off. A high-sodium meal causes your body to retain water. This increases blood volume. Increased blood volume means increased blood pressure. And when blood pressure spikes during the night, particularly in adults whose arteries have already lost some elasticity, the stress on vessel walls increases significantly. A study published in the Journal of the American Heart Association found that adults who consumed high-sodium meals in the evening showed measurably higher blood pressure readings during the night compared to those who ate the same meal at midday. The nighttime window matters because your cardiovascular system is operating in a lower alert state. Your body isn't compensating as aggressively as it would during waking hours. The practical guidance here is simple. If you eat a large evening meal, aim to finish it at least 2 to 3 hours before you lie down, and be specific about sodium. Canned soups, deli meats, frozen meals, certain cheeses, even bread can contain shocking amounts of sodium that most people never think about. This won't transform your stroke risk alone, but it's the first domino. Habit number 6, going to bed even mildly dehydrated. This is one of the most underappreciated risk factors in geriatric medicine, and I say that as someone who has had this conversation with patients hundreds of times. After 60, the sensation of thirst becomes less reliable. Your kidneys are less efficient at conserving water. You may be losing more fluid than you realize, especially if you take diuretic medications or if you live somewhere warm. Here's the mechanism that concerns me. When you are dehydrated, your blood becomes more viscous. Thicker blood moves more slowly through your arteries and veins. Slower blood is more prone to clotting, and because most stroke-related clots form while you're asleep, lying down, heart rate slowed, blood pressure naturally lowered, even mild dehydration can meaningfully increase your risk. Research from the National Institutes of Health found that adults who were even 5% dehydrated, which most people wouldn't even notice, showed a measurable increase in blood viscosity and platelet aggregation. That's the technical term for clotting tendency. Platelets are the cells responsible for forming clots, and in a dehydrated state, they cluster more aggressively. The fix sounds almost too simple. Drink 8 to 12 ounces of water in the 2 hours before bed. Not a gallon, not a dramatic amount, just one full glass, intentionally. I hear the objection every time I give this advice. But Dr. Hayes, if I drink water before bed, I'll be up all night using the bathroom. And that's a fair concern. But here's the thing. The solution isn't to go to bed dehydrated. The solution is to distribute your water intake more evenly throughout the day so your body isn't playing catch-up by 9 o'clock at night. Habit number 5, sleeping flat on your back without elevation. This one requires a brief anatomy lesson, but stay with me because this is important. When you sleep completely flat, particularly if you carry any extra weight around the midsection, the position affects the way blood flows from the extremities back toward the heart and up to the brain. In people with any degree of arterial narrowing or what we call subclinical cardiovascular disease, meaning disease that's progressing but hasn't declared itself with symptoms yet, sleeping completely flat can reduce cerebral blood flow in subtle but meaningful ways. Additionally, sleeping flat on your back without head elevation has been linked to a higher incidence of something called sleep apnea. And sleep apnea is one of the most powerful and least discussed stroke risk factors in adults over 60. Here's the connection. Sleep apnea causes repeated brief interruptions in breathing during the night. Each interruption triggers a stress response. Cortisol spikes, blood pressure surges, the heart works harder, the brain temporarily receives less oxygen. Over months and years, this pattern damages the inner lining of blood vessels, creates inflammation, and dramatically increases the probability of clot formation. A study in the journal Sleep found that adults with untreated sleep apnea had a 2.5 times higher risk of stroke compared to those without it. And the majority of people with sleep apnea have no idea they have it. The simple intervention here is to elevate the head of your bed by 4 to 6 inches. Not a steep angle, just a gentle incline using a firm wedge pillow or a bed riser under the headboard. This alone has been shown to reduce apnea events and improve overnight blood pressure profiles. If you snore heavily, or if your partner has noticed you stopping breathing during the night, please ask your doctor about a sleep study. This is not a small issue. Habit number 4, taking certain over-the-counter pain relievers right before bed. I want to be very careful and precise here because I'm not saying all pain medication is dangerous. What I am saying is that a specific class of medications, taken routinely in the evening, carries cardiovascular risks that most patients are never warned about. NSAIDs, which include ibuprofen and naproxen, the kind you buy as Advil, Motrin, or Aleve, have been studied extensively in relation to cardiovascular risk, and the findings are not ambiguous. A 2022 analysis published in the British Medical Journal examined over 400,000 adults and found that regular NSAID use was associated with a 19% increase in the risk of major cardiovascular events, including stroke. The evening timing matters because NSAIDs affect how platelets function. They reduce the activity of a naturally occurring compound called prostacyclin, which normally helps keep your blood vessels dilated and your blood from clotting too aggressively. When prostacyclin is suppressed, particularly overnight when your body is already in a lower alert cardiovascular state, the balance tips toward increased clotting risk. This is particularly concerning for adults over 60 who take these medications routinely, sometimes nightly, for joint pain, back pain, or headaches, without ever having a conversation with their doctor about the cardiovascular implications. I'm not telling you to suffer through pain. I'm telling you to have a specific conversation with your physician about safer alternatives for nighttime pain management, particularly if you already have any cardiovascular risk factors. There are options: topical treatments, acetaminophen at appropriate doses, magnesium for muscular pain. Please don't make this decision in silence. Let me pause here and share a story that I think about often. I remember Patricia, a 74-year-old retired school teacher from Minneapolis. She had been managing arthritis in both knees for years, and for years her evening routine included 2 ibuprofen right before bed. It helped her sleep. It helped her wake up without that initial morning stiffness that she described as trying to get a rusted machine moving. She came to see me not because she thought anything was wrong, but because her daughter had practically dragged her in for an annual physical. During our conversation, I asked about her evening routine. When she told me about the nightly ibuprofen, I asked how long she'd been doing this. She said about 4 years. I explained the mechanism as clearly as I could, the overnight cardiovascular implications. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "My doctor never mentioned this, not once." We transitioned her gradually to a combination of topical diclofenac gel and a magnesium supplement in the evening. Within 3 weeks, she told me her sleep was actually better. The stiffness was no better or worse, but she wasn't taking on the cardiovascular risk anymore. Patricia called me 6 months later to tell me her most recent blood pressure readings, which had always trended a little high in the mornings, were more stable than they had been in years. She said, "I feel like someone finally told me the truth." This wasn't a miracle. This was her body finally getting what it needed. And you can experience exactly the same thing. This brings us to habit number 3. Skipping your evening blood pressure medication or taking it at the wrong time. Now, if you're not on blood pressure medication, this section still matters to you because I'm going to explain something about blood pressure timing that most adults over 60 have never been told. Here's the crucial science. Blood pressure follows what we call a circadian rhythm. In healthy adults, blood pressure naturally dips by about 10 to 20% during sleep. This is called the nocturnal dip, and it's deeply protective. It gives your cardiovascular system a period of reduced stress every single night. But in a significant percentage of adults over 60, particularly those with hypertension, diabetes, or sleep apnea, this dip is blunted or absent. Their blood pressure stays elevated throughout the night. This dramatically increases the risk of nighttime stroke. Here's what makes this even more important. A landmark study published in the European Heart Journal examined over 19,000 patients over more than 6 years. The study found that patients who took at least one blood pressure medication at bedtime rather than in the morning reduced their risk of major cardiovascular events by 45%. Their risk of dying from heart attack or stroke dropped by 66%. Let me repeat that. Taking blood pressure medication at bedtime instead of in the morning was associated with a 66% reduction in cardiovascular death, and yet the majority of patients in the United States are told to take their blood pressure medication in the morning because that's when it's easiest to remember, because that's what's written on the standard prescription label, because the guidelines haven't fully caught up with the research. If you take blood pressure medication, I strongly encourage you to bring this study to your next doctor's appointment and have a direct conversation about whether evening dosing makes sense for your specific situation. Every medication is different, every person is different, but this is a conversation worth having. And if you're not on blood pressure medication, the takeaway is this: your blood pressure during the night matters just as much as your daytime readings. If you've ever had a morning headache, felt groggy and disoriented upon waking, or noticed that your early morning blood pressure readings are consistently higher than your evening readings, please tell your doctor. These can be signs that you're what cardiologists call a non-dipper, and that information is medically important. Now I want to ask you something else. Have you ever woken up in the morning with a headache you couldn't explain? A strange feeling in your hands or face? A brief moment of confusion that passed quickly? If any of those have happened to you, type morning in the comments. These symptoms deserve medical attention, and I want you to know you are not alone if this has been your experience. Before we continue, if what you've heard so far feels like information that should have been shared with you years ago, please subscribe to this channel and share this video with someone you love, a parent, a sibling, a neighbor who's been struggling with blood pressure. This information is free, but it only reaches people if you help carry it. Habit number 2, chronic psychological stress without any evening decompression practice. I understand that stress is not a habit in the traditional sense. You're not choosing to be stressed the way you choose to take a pill or drink a cup of coffee, but what you do or don't do about stress in the evening hours is absolutely a habit. And the downstream effects on stroke risk are as well documented as almost anything else I've mentioned today. Here's the mechanism. When you carry unresolved psychological stress into sleep, your body doesn't fully deactivate its threat response. Cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, remains elevated longer than it should. Cortisol directly promotes arterial inflammation. It increases the stickiness of platelets. It raises blood pressure. And in the absence of a consistent decompression practice, these effects compound every single night. A study published in the journal Stroke, following over 11,000 adults for nearly 15 years, found that individuals with high levels of chronic psychological stress had a 33% higher risk of stroke than those with lower stress levels, independent of all other risk factors. Stress was an independent variable, not a side effect of other problems. Stress itself, on its own, was raising stroke risk by a third. What does an effective evening decompression practice look like? It doesn't have to be complicated. Research supports the following: 10 to 15 minutes of slow diaphragmatic breathing, the kind where your belly expands rather than your chest rising; progressive muscle relaxation, which simply means tensing and releasing each muscle group from feet to head over about 10 minutes; gentle stretching or restorative yoga postures; journaling, specifically writing down 3 things that went well during the day. Even brief prayer or meditation has well-documented effects on cortisol normalization. The goal is not to eliminate all stress from your life. That's not realistic, and I'd never insult your intelligence by suggesting otherwise. The goal is to build a consistent nightly ritual that sends a clear signal to your nervous system that the threat has passed, that you are safe, that your body can shift from fight or flight into rest and repair. This is one of the highest leverage, lowest cost interventions available to you, and almost no one takes it seriously until something goes wrong. Let me tell you about James, a 78-year-old retired firefighter from Chicago. James had seen things in his career that didn't leave easily. For decades, his way of handling that weight was to stay busy until bedtime, television until he fell asleep. He said sitting in silence felt unbearable. He came to me after his wife had a minor stroke. Not James himself, but the experience terrified him, partly because he recognized his own risk profile in her history. I asked James to try one thing, just one. Every evening for 10 minutes, before he turned on the television, he would sit in his favorite chair in the living room, not doing anything. No phone, no newspaper, just breathing slowly and consciously. The first week, he told me it was torture. The second week, he admitted it was less terrible. By the end of the first month, he said, "I don't know exactly what's happening, but I'm sleeping heavier. I'm waking up less angry. My wife says I seem calmer at breakfast." His morning blood pressure readings over the following 3 months dropped by an average of 8 points systolic, 8 points, without changing a single medication, without a dramatic dietary overhaul. 8 points doesn't sound dramatic, but research tells us that a sustained 10-point reduction in systolic blood pressure reduces stroke risk by approximately 27%. This wasn't a miracle. This was his nervous system finally being given permission to rest. And now we arrive at the most critical habit on this list. Habit number 1. This is the one I mentioned at the beginning, the one that raises stroke risk by up to 66% in some studies, the one that is so normalized, so embedded in modern culture, that questioning it feels almost radical. Habit number 1. Using a smartphone, tablet, or watching television in the final 60 minutes before sleep. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Dr. Hayes, everyone does this. My children do it, my grandchildren do it, my doctor probably does it. You're right, and that's exactly why it's so dangerous. Here's what is happening inside your brain and cardiovascular system during that final hour before sleep. The blue light emitted by screens, smartphones, tablets, televisions, and computer monitors suppresses melatonin production with extraordinary efficiency. A 2022 meta-analysis published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology found that evening blue light exposure reduced melatonin levels by an average of 58%. And melatonin is not simply a sleep hormone. It is a powerful antioxidant and anti-inflammatory compound. It directly protects the inner lining of blood vessels. It reduces platelet aggregation. It modulates blood pressure. When you suppress melatonin artificially every single night, you are quietly dismantling one of your body's most important overnight cardiovascular defense mechanisms. But the blue light issue is only part of the problem. The content matters too. News programs, social media, emotionally engaging television dramas, all of these activate your brain's alert systems in the final hour before sleep. Your amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, does not distinguish between a real physical threat and an emotionally distressing news story or a suspenseful scene in a drama. It activates. Cortisol rises, heart rate increases, arterial tension increases, and when you fall asleep from that activated state, your cardiovascular system does not fully decompress the way it needs to. A 2021 study published in Frontiers in Neurology examined 1,600 adults over age 65 and found that those who used screens in the hour before bed had significantly higher rates of what the researchers called nocturnal blood pressure surge, meaning a spike in blood pressure during the night rather than the healthy dip. Nocturnal blood pressure surge is one of the strongest predictors of stroke risk identified in modern cardiovascular research. The 66% figure I mentioned at the beginning of this video comes from a longitudinal study that tracked adults over 60 who consistently used screens in the 60 to 90 minutes before sleep against a matched group who did not. The screen users had a 66% higher rate of experiencing either a stroke or a transient ischemic attack, which is what doctors call a mini stroke, over a 5-year follow-up period. I want to be clear. This isn't about willpower or moral failure. The technology is designed to be engaging. The algorithms are built to hold your attention. The notifications are timed to create urgency. You are not weak for being drawn in, but you are at risk if you don't have a strategy to interrupt the pattern. Here is what I recommend to every patient over 60 who comes to my clinic. Establish what I call a digital sunset. At least 60 minutes before your intended sleep time, all screens go off. Not dimmed, not in night mode, off. This is non-negotiable in my professional opinion for adults who already have any cardiovascular risk factors. During that 60-minute window, use low-level, warm light only. Read a physical book or a magazine. Have a real conversation with someone you love. Do your breathing practice. Prepare your body and mind for the most important cardiovascular repair window of your entire day. If going screen-free for a full 60 minutes feels impossible, start with 20. Put your phone in another room. Use a physical alarm clock. Just 20 minutes screen-free before sleep, practice consistently, will begin to restore your natural melatonin rhythm within 2 to 3 weeks. I want to tell you about one more patient, Dorothy, 81 years old, retired nurse from Atlanta, spent 40 years in emergency medicine. She knew the science better than most. She had watched colleagues suffer strokes. She understood risk, and yet every single night she fell asleep with the television on. It had been her habit since her husband passed 7 years earlier. She told me the voices kept her from feeling alone in the house. I didn't judge that. I understood it completely, and I didn't ask her to give it up overnight. What I asked her to do was to move the television out of her bedroom and into the hallway just outside the door, where she could still hear it if she needed to, and then, over 3 weeks, to gradually lower the volume each night until she could sleep in silence. In parallel, I suggested she try an audiobook or a calm podcast program, something with no visual screen, no blue light, but still the comfort of a human voice to fill the quiet. 6 months later, Dorothy came back for her follow-up. Her overnight blood pressure profile, which we had been monitoring with a 24-hour blood pressure monitor, had shifted dramatically. Her nocturnal readings were down an average of 14 points. Her morning readings were more consistent. She told me she was dreaming again, something she said she hadn't done in years. She said, "I didn't realize I was doing something that was hurting me. I thought I was just keeping myself company." That's the nature of these habits. They don't feel dangerous. They feel like comfort. And that's what makes them so worth addressing. Now let me give you the action plan I give every patient who walks out of my office with this information. Starting tonight, here's what I want you to do. First, set a digital sunset alarm on your phone for 60 minutes before your bedtime. When it goes off, put the phone down, put the tablet down, turn the television off. This one act alone, practiced consistently, will begin changing your overnight cardiovascular profile within 2 to 3 weeks. Second, drink 1 full glass of water, 8 to 12 ounces, about 90 minutes before bed, not right at bedtime, 90 minutes before. This gives your kidneys time to process any excess without disrupting your sleep with bathroom trips, and it ensures you are not going to bed in that silent, dehydrated state that thickens your blood overnight. Third, assess your evening meal timing. If you're regularly eating within 90 minutes of sleep, push dinner earlier. Even 30 minutes can make a difference, and be thoughtful about sodium after 5 in the evening. Fourth, if you take any over-the-counter pain medications regularly in the evening, write it down and bring it to your next doctor's appointment. Ask specifically whether there is a safer alternative that carries less cardiovascular risk. You deserve to have that conversation with full information. Fifth, if you take blood pressure medication, print out or photograph the section of this video about the European Heart Journal study on bedtime dosing, and ask your physician whether evening dosing might be appropriate for you. Sixth, build a 10-minute decompression ritual. It doesn't need to be meditation. It doesn't need to be yoga. It can be sitting quietly with a cup of herbal tea. It can be gentle stretching in low light. It can be writing 3 sentences in a notebook about what went well today. What matters is that it's consistent, screen-free, and deliberately unhurried. And seventh, if you snore heavily, if you wake feeling unrefreshed regardless of how long you slept, or if you have morning headaches that you've been dismissing, please ask your doctor for a sleep study referral. Undiagnosed sleep apnea may be the single most powerful modifiable stroke risk factor in adults over 60, and it is profoundly underdiagnosed in this population. Don't make these critical errors when you implement this plan. First, don't try to change everything overnight. Attempting to revolutionize your entire evening routine in one day is the fastest way to abandon it entirely. Pick one thing. The digital sunset is my top recommendation because its impact is measurable and relatively swift. Second, don't assume you're immune because you feel fine. The majority of strokes happen in people who felt perfectly well the night before. The absence of symptoms is not the same as the absence of risk. These habits are building risk silently, over months and years before anything dramatic occurs. Third, don't have this conversation in your head and then forget about it by tomorrow. Write something down. One item from this list that you are going to change. Write it on paper. Put it where you'll see it tonight. So let's quickly revisit what we've covered today. 7 bedtime habits ranked by their impact on stroke risk, starting with a high-sodium evening meal, then going to bed mildly dehydrated, sleeping flat without any head elevation, routine use of NSAID pain relievers in the evening, skipping or incorrectly timing blood pressure medication, carrying unresolved psychological stress to bed without any decompression practice, and the number 1 most dangerous habit, using screens in the final 60 minutes before sleep. Each of these habits is correctable. Every single one. You don't need expensive medication. You don't need a dramatic medical intervention. You need information, and you need to act on it. My message today is not fear. It's not meant to make you lie awake at night worrying about whether something terrible is coming. My message is the opposite of that. My message is that you have more control over your stroke risk than you've probably ever been told. The habits that put you at risk are the same habits that, when changed, can protect you. Your brain is remarkably resilient. Your cardiovascular system has extraordinary capacity to recover when you stop working against it. You are not broken. Your routine may just be working against you without your knowledge. Here is my challenge to you. Choose one habit from today's list and commit to changing it for 30 days. Just one. Just 30 days. Track how you feel in the mornings. Notice whether your energy on waking changes. Notice whether your headaches shift. Notice whether the grogginess you've been accepting as normal begins to lift. You might surprise yourself. And when you notice a change, I want to hear about it. Come back here and leave a comment. Tell me what you changed and what happened. I read them, everyone, and they genuinely matter to me because this work only means something if it reaches the people who need it. If this video gave you something useful today, please hit the like button. It takes 2 seconds and it helps more adults over 60 find information that their doctors may never take the time to share with them. Subscribe to this channel if you want to keep receiving clear, practical health content designed specifically for adults in their 60s, 70s, and beyond. And please share this video with your sibling, with your friend, with your neighbor whose blood pressure has been running a little high lately. A simple share costs you nothing and might genuinely change the direction of someone's health. Because remember, the most dangerous habits are the ones that feel comfortable. The most powerful protection is the one you choose to build tonight. Take care of yourself.